The massacre was only the beginning. Who did this to us? Who attacked the tribe?
All we can do is pray to the goddess.
No. Praying won't save us. We have to find the killers.
So you will have to leave the sacred land.
Where the trail leads, I will go.
Aloy of the Nora, what brings you to Meridian?
There's a threat to us all. Men in masks, raising up ancient machines. And I've seen their leader.
From the depths, I will raise an army. A storm of shadows to take back what's ours. What's it doing to them?
Taking control. You can see the corruption coming off them in smoke.
You've come a long way since the Citadel, Aloy.
Who are you?
An interested party.
Braves, to Aloy's side, now!
So it comes to this.
What is it?
The end. Or how it begins, anyway.
There's so much more to discover before the world ends.
Hey guys, welcome to Graffiti Rose Gaming. My name is China M, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite video games called Horizon Zero Dawn. However, we're going to approach it a little differently. We're going to talk about it in relation to some traditional art forms and why it's important to know about who you are, where you come from, and the communities that you belong to. So it's going to be really interesting. Sit back, relax, and without further ado, let's get started. Ancestral heritage is highly important in many cultures. Knowing who came before us is an integral part of our identity, and many individual identities are derived from a shared community identity. This brings me to our first art piece called the Bear Transformation Mask, which is decorated in traditional, now bear with me, Wak fashion, which scholars refer to as formline, and please forgive me if I completely butchered that name. The mask is adorned with multiple shapes around the pupils and eyes of the mask, whereas tinted hues of blue, red, black, and natural wood coloring give this mask its distinct identity. This mask is made up of different flaps that open to reveal another species or another face underneath. On the outside we see a bear, but when the flaps are open, the bear is transformed into an eagle or seagull-like creature. This mask is related to mythologies within the Kwakwakwaku, or formerly known Kwakutl, people's native culture, where the transformation tells the story of Namuguis, who was a bird, but turned into a man when he landed on Earth. However, these masks have a deeper function than mythology and art. They also function as integral parts of ceremonies called potlatches, where different aspects of the tribe's culture is celebrated, including weddings, births, and the transfer of power or leadership from one chief to his successor. Therefore, these masks tell a story of family, community, tradition, and belonging. The next art piece we will discuss is one of my favorites, just because it is different than the other traditional forms of art that we've discussed so far. This piece is called the Horned Creature Shoulder Tattoo, and it was discovered tattooed on the shoulder of a 2,500-year-old mummy known as the Princess of Ukok, whose body was buried around 500 BCE. She is believed to come from the Pazyryk peoples of the Scythian lands. The tattoo depicts a deer-like animal with multiple horns protruding from its head. Deers were considered sacred animals to the Pazyryk peoples and were just one of many different animals represented, including snow leopards, sheep, and horses. However, most of the animals were depicted as hybrid beings or possible deities. Research is still being conducted to uncover the full story behind the Pazyryk beliefs, but this tattoo is a representation of how stories are important to the development of who we are as people and cannot be easily erased. Okay, now there is so much to discuss about this next art piece, but I'm going to try my best to keep it simple and to the point while still providing enough information towards the significance of this piece. This art piece is called Reconstruction of the Maize God Mural of the San Bartolo, Guatemala, and this mural plays a very important role in the depiction of a creation narrative. In this mural, we see multiple figures in beautiful bright hues of red, black, and faint yellow. However, what we are looking at is the Maya people's depiction of creation through the story of one of their deities known as Maize God. The story is told from right to left, and if you're from the Western culture, then that's a little different than what you're used to, but the idea of stories being told from left to right is mostly a Western ideal. There are plenty of cultures where stories in the form of the story moves from the right to the left. Therefore, this piece shows the Maize God, who is believed to be the tall red figure in the middle, during the moment that he was given a calabash or squash. We then move to the far left side of the mural and we see what appears to be the same squash as before, only this time it has been broken open by Chak, the Maya rain god, and is sprouting people from its top. All the figures stand on a long, curling serpent-like creature and are having the ceremonies at what appears to be the mouth of a sacred cave. Although some aspects of the mural are still being uncovered and debated among scholars, this is an amazing depiction of the Maya people's beliefs and understanding of the creation of humanity. We are shown a direct connection between the land, agriculture, and life. Now, this creation narrative is distinct to the Maya peoples who lived in what is now called San Bartolo. However, other Maya living in different regions had slightly different creation narratives. This goes to show that surroundings and landscapes can have a direct influence on one's perspective and cultural beliefs. This particular art piece is a stencil reconstruction of what originally is a beautifully colorful artwork known as Yam Story 1 by Emily Kame Kangware. Kangware was a part of the indigenous peoples of arid Central Australia. She was raised surrounded by her cultural heritage, which included sacred rituals and dances. Kangware later became a ceremonial leader of Aweliye, or women's business, which was a special well of knowledge reserved for only the women of the tribe to learn and possess. Later in life is when Kangware studied more Western styles of art and began depicting her native lands through beautiful arrays of colors and textures. The title Yam Story relates to what is known as the Dreamtime, or the idea of creation stories and experiences that are sacred and only passed on through word of mouth, song, and dances. These beliefs are guarded by the tribes that they belong to and are only meant to be known within the tribe, therefore contributing to a sacred set of beliefs that are held of high importance within the different tribal cultures they belong to. This last piece is interesting in its depiction as well as the question that it poses. The piece on the left is called Portrait Vessel of a Ruler, whereas on the right is called Neo Huaco by Ana de Orbegoso. The portrait vessel of a ruler is known as a stirrup spout that is distinctly belonging to the Moche peoples of Peru. This vessel was used to depict people or leaders of higher importance. However, Orbegoso's golden painted depiction on the right forms multiple questions and makes a bold statement about history. She recreated the vessel faceless and covered in gold. This relates to the Spanish conquisition that was led across the Amazon and into the Andes, which is now known as Peru. However, the most distinct part of her work is the fact that it is faceless and reflective. When you look into it, you see yourself looking back. Orbegoso created this piece as part of her 2017 series. Now, bear with me for a moment because my Spanish is not the best. Orbegoso's 2017 series is called En que hacemos con nuestra historia, or translated into What do we do with our history? This is such a thought-provoking question as it rounds out what many of these pieces are ultimately incorporating. However, throughout the course of history, so much is not only built but also lost, and much of it can be destroyed. Therefore, Orbegoso's question raises another, not only about what we do with our history, but what we do to it. Okay, now this brings me to discuss one of my favorite video games called Horizon Zero Dawn. Now this is a PlayStation exclusive, well, up to a few months ago it was a PlayStation exclusive, because now it's also available on PC, but that's an entirely other story. Anyway, moving on. Horizon Zero Dawn is a game set in a post-apocalyptic future, but what is so amazing about this story is that it is set so far into the future. It's as if society and people have regressed into the past. You see, the world we live in now in the game is considered the old world, or the old ones, referring to us as the broken down society that caused the entire world to collapse to the ground. And what was left are people who separated and became what is now known as multiple different tribes that took up different parts of the regions within the game. Now, you're going to play as a main character called Aloy. And Aloy is a very interesting character, and she's very different and unique in her perspective of the world. However, she comes from a tribe called the Nora. And what's interesting about the Nora is that they're ran and governed by women. Women are held as the hierarchy within the tribe, and they worship a deity called All Mother. Now, there's a lot more to the story, and there's a lot more lore and other things that go on, and there's a whole plot to it and everything, but I just kind of wanted to focus on the different tribal aspects of the game and how interesting it was to see these things come to life in a modern perspective, because the creators of the game were actually inspired by Native American tribes that were in different regions of the Americas. And this was very interesting when I read about it, because it showed how much an influence that history and different cultures can have on something so modern as a video game. Now, another thing that I find very interesting and unique about Horizon Zero Dawn, and this actually relates a lot to the artwork that we were just recently talking about. Whereas in the game you have multiple different tribes, and these tribes aren't very close together. A lot of them are spread out across a very wide and very elaborate map. And because these tribes are so spread out from each other, they're in different regions of the map. Therefore, when Aloy goes on her journey to uncover the truth of the world she lives in, she encounters a lot of these different tribes, and she realizes that they all share, you know, this common tribal mentality of community and doing everything for the good of everyone there and all of that. But at the same time, they have their own distinct set of beliefs. And it's really interesting to see, because their beliefs in everything are shaped by their surroundings, their landscapes, their perspectives, and how they were grown up in the world around them. And so I just think it's interesting, because we talked about with the art pieces how, you know, such as with the reconstruction mural of the Maze God, where we talked about how that was distinctly a belief held by the Maya people of that particular region of what is now known as San Bartolo. But there were other Maya people who lived in other regions who had slightly different takes on the creation narrative. And I just thought that was interesting, because it shows how our surroundings and the world around us can truly shape how we see it. And I just think that's really interesting, and it shows how we can be distinctly unique and individualistic while still being a part of a very community type of identity, or community identity, which I think is really interesting. Now, another connection that I would like to make is actually related to the last art piece that we talked about, that was the art creation by Baragesso, who created the Niuhoako depiction of the stirrup spout, which was made by the Moche people. And I just thought it was really interesting because she called her series, once again, here goes my attempt at Spanish. She called her series En que hacemos con nuestra historia, or what do we do with our history? And I thought this was interesting because in the game of Horizon Zero Dawn, the tribe that Aloy comes from, the Nora, it is actually forbidden to talk about the old people or the old times or the old ways, and any type of technology or anything that you find that looks like it belonged to the old world is completely forbidden. And you're not to talk about it, you're not to go looking for it, and Aloy is such a curious person that that's exactly what she wants to do. And what I think is so interesting is that the world we live in the game is considered to be old. It's considered to be the history that they're not wanting to talk about. And this history is just being trampled on and destroyed and left to rot and fall apart. And it just really makes me think about how there's so much history in this world. There's so many different ideals and concepts and beliefs and different ways that people view the society and the world that we live in. And history is not just one thing. History is a compilation of experiences and uniqueness, and is so rich and is so flourishing, and at the same time there's so much of it that we still don't know. And it's because there might be cases where we don't have access to it. There might be cases of where we just haven't discovered it yet, or in very sad cases it's been destroyed to the point where it will never be known. And that's the part that's kind of sad in a way. You know, there's things that have just been left to rot and fall apart and decay, and they're no more. And so what's really left is the people that have these stories that relate to the world around them, and through their eyes we can get a glimpse into that historical aspect of what the world used to be like and how it's perceived now. So I just find it very interesting, and I think that in this game, even though yes, it's a work of fiction, I think this game is just very interesting in its depiction of that concept of how what is once new will become old, where what you are now is going to one day be history, and so everything you do matters. And so I think that's just a really interesting mentality to have, and I think it's very well incorporated in this game, and I think it was very distinct in the art pieces that we talked about, of how, in a way, all of us are our own pieces of history. And what we do with our history matters. And what we do to our history matters. Because one day we're not going to be here to talk about it. And so it's going to be left to the perspective of those and the people that we pass it on to. And I just think that's really interesting. But other than that, I just want to thank you for watching this video, and thank you for visiting my channel. Please follow the links below if you have any more questions, or leave a comment, like and subscribe. You know, I gotta get that out there. But thank you so much, and there might be a part 2 to this, which will focus on another game probably. But thank you so much. Be kind, be great, and play on.